to you.
Good morning again. I want to take you on a walk down this particular street. Now, it may not look like much, but before we had this, or this, or this, we had this. This is the Calle Las Damas. Now, this pretty unassuming road marks a major first for the Americas. This road, Calle Las Damas, which runs through the heart of Santo Domingo's UNESCO World Heritage listed Colonial district, was the first paved road in the Americas. Is that a big deal? Yes. I think it is, yeah. Not just because roads previously looked like this and turned into mud baths whenever it rained, but because this paved road symbolized something important. It symbolized a new Spain, and it symbolized a new America. Santo Domingo was the first permanent European settlement in the Americas, and the Calle Las Damas was symbolic of the beginnings of European influence and infrastructure in the New World. It was about showing off to the locals. It was about asserting authority, about demonstrating civility to the uncivilized. But it was also about making the Spanish settlers feel at home here. This was, after all, New Spain. Over the next few talks, we'll come to discover more and more about the Spanish conquistadors' colonization of Central and South America. Today, let's start at the very beginning of that story with Christopher Columbus. And for Spain, this was all a very happy accident. Because Christopher Columbus, or as the Spanish like to call him, Cristobal Colón, was actually born as Christopher Colombo, not in Spain, but in the Republic of Genoa, which is now part of Italy. The Genoese, just like the Venetians, had a long and storied history of naval conquest and control in the Mediterranean Sea. But it was the Portuguese who really led the charge in maritime expansion beyond Europe. And looking for greatness, Columbus moved to Portugal in his mid-30s. He had a particular mission in mind. He wanted to find a western sea route to the East Indies, a new trade route that removed the need to sail around Africa or to take the old Silk Road through Asia and the Ottoman Empire. But Columbus couldn't convince John II of Portugal to back his voyage. In fact, he tried many European monarchs, and no one seemed particularly interested in Columbus's mission, until he approached the Spanish court. Through his network, which conveniently included the Queen's former confessor, Friar Juan Perez, and also the royal treasurer, Luis de Santangel, Columbus was able to wrangle an audience with King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. So, Columbus put forward his case, which was reviewed by a royal commission of experts, which advised the king and queen to say no. No thanks. The mission was too expensive. The Spanish were busy trying to win back land from the Moors in the south, and frankly, Columbus had made some mistakes with his maths, and nobody believed he actually knew where Asia was on the map anyway. So it was a no. But Columbus hung around like a bad smell, and it was worth his persistence, because once Spain had successfully expelled the Moors from Granada in January 1492, they were ready to look overseas. And they really needed some gold to restock the royal coffers. So from their camp near the city walls of Granada, the king and queen of Spain called the Genoese explorer back in, sat him down in their royal tent, and presented him with the capitulations of Santa Fe. Santa Fe being the name of the camp. This was in April 1492, and Columbus accepted the following terms. From this moment on, he would receive the title Admiral of the Ocean Sea. He would be appointed viceroy and governor of any lands he discovered, and he would receive 10% of the profits from the voyage. Unusually generous terms, especially for someone who really didn't know where he was going. But hey, some people fail upwards. Columbus set sail in August of the same year with a fleet of 3 ships. They were crewed by 90 intrepid sailors, officers, and adventurers. After 70 days at sea, they sighted land, and they took a brief pit stop on an island in the Bahamas, which Columbus, now of course its governor, named San Salvador. But there was a more critical discovery yet to come. On December the 6th, 1492, Columbus stepped foot on an island which is quite perfectly detailed in the ship's log. At the hour of Vespers, the admiral reached this port, to which he gave the name of Puerto de San Nicolas, in honor of St. Nicholas, whose day it was. And on entering it, he was astonished at its beauty and excellence. In his own diary a day before making land, Columbus wrote that the island he could see was the most beautiful island that eyes has ever seen. That island is now known as Hispaniola. That island is today 2/3 Dominican Republic and 1/3 Haiti. So Columbus was pretty keen on what he saw, and as luck would have it, in his enthusiasm for the island, his flagship, Santa Maria, ran aground there. So with the wreckage, Columbus did something monumental that would alter the course of history. He ordered the construction of La Navidad, the first European settlement in the New World. 39 of his 90 men were left at La Navidad to explore and establish a foothold while he returned to Spain with his news. Carrying indigenous captives of the Taino people, gold, and other exotic goods to present to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, Columbus's first expedition was deemed a success. Now, funnily enough, when Columbus returned to Spain with this news that he'd reached the Indies via his western sea route, and when he told them of this abundance of gold and other riches, and its great potential for conversion to Christianity, Ferdinand and Isabella weren't the only monarchs interested. Suddenly, Portugal, so steadfast against supporting Columbus's mission at first, also became intrigued as to what else might be discovered out across the ocean sea in Asia. But that was Spanish territory now. And you know how I know? Because the Pope said so. In 1493, Pope Alexander VI issued a series of bulls granting Castile dominion over all as of yet undiscovered lands in the Western Hemisphere. And that really upset Portugal, because as another Catholic monarchy, the Pope's ruling that everything in the Western Hemisphere belonged to Spain sort of got in the way of any fledgling Portuguese plans to head out west and pick up a few lands for themselves. If only they'd given Columbus a chance. After all, he had asked them first. They'd had every opportunity to say yes. Well, the Portuguese petitioned the Pope, and a year later, in 1494, Spain and Portugal signed the Treaty of Tordesillas, which divided the non-European world between those two countries, along an arbitrary meridian 370 leagues west of the Cape Verde Islands. So Castile, that's Spain, received the rights to lands west of that line, and Portugal received the rights to lands east of it. And that is how one very large South American country speaks Portuguese. But back to Spanish America for now. And let's return to the island of Hispaniola, as Columbus did in November 1493, to find his first new Spanish settlement, La Navidad, burned to the ground. Of his 39 men that he left there to explore the area, gather gold, establish relations with the local Taino people, every single one was dead. Conflicts with neighboring Taino groups had turned sour and they'd turned violent. And it was pretty obvious who had won that battle. But Columbus wasn't one for giving up. And so in 1496, having granted the governorship of Hispaniola to his brother Bartholomew, a second Spanish settlement was set up, named La Nueva Isabela, in honor of Queen Isabella. Now, La Nueva Isabela was relocated in 1592 under the orders of the new governor, Nicolas de Ovando, from the eastern side of the Ozama River to the western bank, where it remains today. The settlement was renamed Santo Domingo. It was the administrative hub of Spain's growing empire in the New World, a true city of firsts. The first paved road in Americas, 1502. The first hospital, 1503. The first cathedral, built over 20 years from 1521. The first American university, founded in 1538, 98 years before Harvard. It is also our first port of call. So let's open up our portal and collect our first port. So I'd like to describe through the slides as well, because this is the format that we're going to be using through the cruise. Many of you have seen this before, but for those of you that haven't, we will always start with a screen with a photograph of what you can expect the port to look like. And then we have some symbols here on the side, which tell you about the port's facilities, which we'll go through in a moment, and the port's name and the flag of the country. Now, we go through more of the logistics in the evening Q&A sessions. So that's where we'll cover up the last-minute logistics side of things and obviously answer any of your questions as well. You can see here the port, it's pretty modern, and generally speaking, they use this air bridge across. So I would anticipate that we're going to use it, but there is also a ground level option, so we tend to find out in the morning of our arrival which one they have gone for. You can see up here on the side, we do expect there to be Wi-Fi inside that building. There are telephones in there as well. There are toilets. There's a small duty-free shopping area. Taxis wait outside. And there should be currency exchange inside that building as well. Otherwise, it's not too far into the town. How far exactly is it into the town? Well, here is a map. And you can see the ship is where the ship is. And the town is here. The bit in the squared off section today, this is the old town. So that's the Colonial district, the UNESCO listed site, the main part to really go and see. That's a 2.5 kilometer walk, 35 minutes roughly. You'll go up along here, and then there's a bridge that cuts across, and then you can come back down. All right, let's get into our first highlights, and you probably won't be surprised that Calle Las Damas is the first highlight, otherwise you weren't concentrating at the beginning. Calle Las Damas is the first paved street in the Americas. It was paved in 1502, and it gained its name thanks to the noblewomen who strolled its lengths, led by Maria de Toledo, who was the wife of Diego Colon, who was the son of Christopher Columbus, the first governor of the island. So lined with major landmarks, more of which we'll go through in our top 10 as well. This street embodies the city's rich history. It offers a glimpse into the colonial era. A stroll here is like stepping back in time. You're surrounded by the stories, the architecture that shaped the new world. I just want to point out a couple of things on this slide before we move on to the next one, just to talk you around it. This is obviously the name of the highlight. This is what number we're on. This is a photograph of it. This is just some top key information, hours, if it's free or not, if there's a website or not. This is a map, and I always put where the ship is and where the item that we're talking about is. and then the distance and roughly how long it would take you to get there. This is a new thing for this year, so I just want to explain this. I've done a traffic light system with the symbol here, and this is for how accessible something is, because I think we all realize that when somebody says that it's accessible, it doesn't always mean the same thing. So green, generally speaking, means it is totally accessible for somebody using a wheelchair. Generally speaking, every part of the site can be enjoyed. If it goes to an orangey amber, it means that most of the site is accessible, but there'll be certain elements which do require using stairs. And if it's red, then it's not accessible for almost the entirety of the site. You might be able to see it from the outside, but you wouldn't be able to head on into the inside. So that's what the traffic light system means there. Let's move on to, oh, you're welcome. And I stand here because this bit's blank. Because last year, everybody on this side of the room couldn't see because I was blocking half the screen. So this is deliberately empty. Here we go, next one, number 2. Now we're going to the Alcázar de Colón. This was built between 1510 and 1512. Now the Alcázar de Colón is the oldest viceregal palace in the entirety of the Americas, so another first. It's right there at the end of Calle Las Damas, this Gothic Mudéjar palace, once home to Diego Colón and his street-walking wife, if you will. Oh dear. Some areas do have stairs, but most of the site, that's why we've gone to an orange here, most of the site is accessible for everyone. Now it is a monumental building, 55 rooms. And these are 55 rooms which have played witness to some of the most important meetings of conquistadors like Cortés, Velázquez, Balboa. It's in these rooms that the Spanish plans to colonize Mexico, Cuba, Peru, and many other places came together before the missions were sent out across the continent. Number 3, another American first. This is the oldest cathedral in the Americas. A stunning Gothic Renaissance masterpiece just one block west of the Calle Las Damas. It's built between 1521 and 1541, and its limestone walls, vaulted ceilings, intricate carvings are admired by visitors daily from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. There are guided tours available. If you really like to get into the nitty-gritty of the cathedral's history, then you could put yourself on a tour. For number 4, you're probably picking up a theme here. This is another American first. This is the very first and still surviving military fortress across either of the 2 American continents. So built between 1502 and 1508, the Fortaleza Ozama is strategically designed to protect the city and its valuable port. My goodness, did that become important. Because as Spain's reputation for gold plundering the Americas became widely known over in Europe, the Caribbean became a hotbed of piracy, and Spanish ships were the prime target. So the fortress features a towering keep, thick stone walls, and a panoramic view of the Ozama River. So it's gorgeous to visit, but of course some parts of this site have pretty steep stairs. Alrighty, number 5. This one's a bit of a schlep to get out to, but it might be worth jumping in a taxi. It's a 13-minute drive to get there. I think I could walk it in about an hour, but if you love your architecture, it's so worth a visit. You can't go inside without a private tour, but even the grounds of the National Palace make it a top 10 highlight for me. It's surrounded by these perfectly pruned gardens, and this architectural masterpiece, which for me is reminiscent of the US Capitol building in DC, it was built between 1944 and 1947. Primarily, it's the official workplace of the President of the Dominican Republic, but members of the public are welcome to explore and relax in the gardens independently through the daytime. And now for one of the most architecturally pleasing buildings in the city, to one of the most shockingly ugly buildings in the city, but this one's really meaningful too. This was only inaugurated in 1992, which explains the poor architectural choices. This is a monumental tribute to Christopher Columbus. It was built to mark the 500th anniversary of his first voyage. So translating in English to the Lighthouse of Columbus, this cross-shaped structure houses a museum, international exhibits, and this is probably the most exciting part, they claim to have interred Columbus's remains here. So this is the final resting place of Christopher Columbus, the great explorer and discoverer of a place that wasn't Asia, but he never knew that. Back to the Calle Las Damas now, and near the top of the road is the Museo de las Casas Reales, the Museum of the Royal Houses. It's housed in a stunning 16th century building, and the museo was originally constructed in 1511. It was there to serve as the administrative offices of the Spanish colonial governors. Nowadays, the museum offers exhibits on the history of the Americas, including artifacts from the Taino people, colonial weapons, and navigational tools. The ground level is accessible, but I think the upper floors require stairs because it's a historic building. Now, if you're making your way over to the UNESCO World Heritage listed Colonial District, then take a walk down to the waterfront and you'll find the monument to Friar Antonio de Montesino. Now, the monument itself is pretty modern in style, also in years. It was inaugurated in 1982 to honor the Dominican friar who delivered a powerful sermon here in Santo Domingo back in 1511. His sermon was condemning the mistreatment of the Taino people by the Spanish colonists. And at the base of the monument is some interpretative signage, so you can learn more about Montesino's role in advocating for human rights. He was ahead of his time. And by the way, he also had good company. Queen Isabella of Castile, the queen who funded Christopher Columbus's missions to South America, had very strict rules about the treatment of indigenous peoples, and she took tough action on conquistadors that she deemed to have disobeyed her rules. But more on that on another day. We've talked quite a bit already about Spanish colonization, so you'd be forgiven for thinking that Independence Park is dedicated to the memory of independence from Spain. But that's not the case. Once the Spanish were kicked out, neighboring Haiti took its moment to invade its larger island partner. And so this park celebrates the Dominican Republic's eventual independence from Haiti in 1844. Important features of the park include the Puerta del Conde, which is the exact site that the Dominican flag was first raised, and the Altar de Patria, which is a marble mausoleum housing the remains of the nation's founding fathers. It's a beautiful, wheelchair-accessible park, wide paths, gorgeous lawns, and a great meaning to the people of the country. Now we'll wrap up our top 10 with another very meaningful site, the Pantheon de la Patria, another mausoleum. This one is located back where we started on the Calle Las Damas, and it honors many of the Dominican Republic's national heroes. It was originally built as a Jesuit church between 1714 and 1746, but over the years it's been repurposed, and in 1956 it was given a new significance as the final resting place of the country's most significant patriots, including Juan Pablo Duarte. It's an impressive building of its own right, but it's also a solemn space for reflection. So please bear this in mind. If you're choosing to go here, pick your outfit for the day, bearing in mind that this is a very solemn place for the locals. Oh, here's a map. You tend to like this slide. It's where I have most of my photographs taken. Oops, hang on, sorry, I'll put it back. So as you can see on this slide, we've got the ship, where the ship is, and all of the numbered highlights in their positions, and then the list down the side so that you can cross-check what the names are. By the way, we will put this on your televisions later so that you can have a look through it again if you would like to. As we wrap up, I want to return to the Calle Las Damas, that first paved road in the Americas. The road where noble women would parade to no particular ends other than to parade, to peacock, to see and to be seen. Now, colonialism has sort of gone off the boil, and generally speaking, people travel without the need to conquer these days. But actually, oh dear. But actually, our journey, our pole-to-pole voyage, is remarkably similar to the daily meanderings of those fancy ladies in 16th century Santo Domingo. We are exploring the world with no particular purpose other than to see and be seen. We're gaining glimpses of customs, cultures, traditions across huge swathes of the world. And we'll experience brand new things, adding to our personal list of firsts. And we'll also start to recognize patterns and similarities that connect the world beyond borders. But we will also be seen. Wherever we are from, whether we're flying our flag or not, we carry our countries and our societies with us. We're taking them on tour. But we are still the guests. The crash and burn conflict style of Columbus's first 39 probably isn't our style. But neither are we seeking to position ourselves higher than the places we visit, like the ladies of Calle Las Damas. Our great pleasure on this voyage isn't a mission to elevate the world nor to reshape it, but a genuine opportunity to experience the planet for what it is. A splendid patchwork quilt where we could marvel at distinction, ponder over differences, and appreciate the joys of our lives throughout. Thank you.